Maria, a 32-year-old woman, had been married for 5 years and had a 6-month-old baby. Since the birth of her son, she had completely neglected herself. The time that she had previously dedicated to her personal appearance had been totally absorbed by the demands and care of the baby. Furthermore, she had had to leave her job because she had no one who could take care of the little one while she worked. Maria's physical appearance clearly reflected this neglect of hers. Her disheveled, dull hair, dark circles under her tired eyes, and her unioned clothes were evidence of her self-imposed lack of attention. She felt that her life had become completely centered around her baby, leaving aside her own image and personal well-being. Not only had her physical appearance suffered the consequences, but also her relationship with her husband, Pedro. Seeing her so disheveled, Pedro began to distance himself emotionally from her. He constantly criticized her for her unkempt appearance, reproaching her for the state of the house and her lack of interest in her own image. Maria felt deeply sad because she believed that Pedro did not appreciate how much she had sacrificed for her son. One night, Pedro arrived late from work. Maria, sitting on the couch, holding her baby in her arms, looked at him with tiredness and sadness in her eyes. Pedro, noticing the floral perfume he was wearing, felt a pang of guilt and approached Maria. "I'm sorry, Maria. I had a very late work meeting," Pedro said, approaching timidly. "I realize that lately I have not been understanding with you and have been overly critical. I understand that you have devoted all your time and energy to the baby, and that has been challenging for you." Maria, surprised by Pedro's words, looked up at him. "I'm glad you admit it, Pedro. I feel so alone and devalued sometimes. Everything I do is for our son, but you don't seem to see it." Pedro sighed and sat next to her on the couch. "You're right, Maria. I've focused on the negative and haven't appreciated everything you've done. I promise I'll do more to support you. We can find a solution together so you can rest and take care of yourself too." Mary was relieved to hear Peter's words. She had waited so long for that moment, for that understanding and support from her husband. They both knew that they had to work on their relationship and on distributing household responsibilities equally. They knew they needed to find a balance between caring for the baby and her life as a couple. However, despite Pedro's promise, the aroma of women's perfume still hung in the air, awakening suspicion in Mary's heart. She knew there were more secrets to discover and that the road to reconciliation would be long and complicated. Despite Pedro's comforting words, suspicion lingered in Maria's mind. The fragrant perfume was still in the air and she couldn't help but think about a possible infidelity on the part of her husband. However, she decided to save her suspicions for another day. She had enough problems on her and, for the moment, she wanted to believe in Peter's promises. The following days, Pedro tried to keep his promise to help more at home. He changed diapers, prepared some meals, and played with the baby, but Maria could sense his discomfort. It was new territory for Pedro and he seemed frustrated, even though he was trying. Maria strove to reinvent herself. Although exhausted, she woke up an hour earlier every day to shower, comb her hair, and dress in clothes other than pajamas. Although the task seemed insurmountable at first, Maria found energy in her desire to reclaim a part of herself. Pedro noticed her efforts and their relationship seemed to improve. However, Pedro's late arrival from work and his lingering smell of feminine perfume remained a problem. One day, Maria decided it was time to confront Pedro. She wanted to trust her husband, but her suspicion and fear were consuming her. "Pedro, we are getting better, but there is something I can't ignore," Maria confessed, as they sat on her old but comfortable couch after the baby fell asleep. Pedro looked at her worried. "What's wrong, Maria?" "The perfume. You always come home with a woman's perfume," Maria said with a trembling voice, searching her eyes for some sign of the truth. Pedro's reaction to her accusation would shape what would happen in their relationship and how her story would continue. But for the moment, the silence between them was the only thing that filled the room as Maria waited for a response. Silence filled the room as Pedro processed Maria's words. He looked disoriented, surprised by the confrontation. But soon, a wave of emotions crossed his face, going from surprise to unease. "Maria, He began to stutter. But adequate words seemed to escape him. Although his expression of surprise and concern seemed genuine, Maria's anxiety only increased. The following days, the atmosphere at home was tense. Pedro seemed more reserved, absent. Meanwhile, Maria struggled not to let his suspicions undermine the recent progress in their relationship and her personal recovery process. Despite the pain that her situation caused her, she decided to focus on taking care of herself and her son. Maria began going for walks every morning with her baby, enjoying the fresh air and the sun on her face. She noticed that her energy and her mood improved with these small changes in her routine. She even started laughing more, interacting with other mothers in the park, and thinking about her chances of returning to work in the future. On the other hand, Peter seemed to be struggling with his own demons. Her late departures from work had reduced, but her face showed wrinkles of worry and stress that weren't there before. Maria could see that her husband was conflicted, and this fueled her suspicions even more. One day, Pedro did not come home until late at night, smelling again of feminine perfume. Maria, tired of the tension and uncertainty, decided it was time to have a definitive conversation. "It seems the perfume is back, Pedro," she said with calm seriousness. Pedro saw her and for a second seemed to fall apart. "We need to talk," Maria added. That night, her conversations would go beyond promises and reproaches. It was a critical night for her marriage and for the future of her family. The truth was about to be revealed, but the story of Mary and Peter was still far from reaching its conclusion. "Maria, it's not what you think," Peter stuttered. He didn't seem surprised by the confrontation, rather he seemed relieved. As if he had been waiting for that conversation as long as Maria had. He began to explain that his boss had hired a consultant to help them with his work project. The woman, named Isabel, used to work late with them, and her lingering perfume tended to permeate everyone. "We're not having an affair," Pedro assured, looking Maria directly in the eyes. "But I understand why you might have thought that, and I'm sorry I didn't explain it sooner." Maria remained silent, processing all the information. She was somewhat relieved by the logical explanation, but she couldn't hide her disappointment at the fact that Pedro hadn't mentioned it to her before. Pedro sighed. "Maria, the fact that I'm late and I reek of women's perfume, it's all work business. But that doesn't mean I'm blind to everything you've been sacrificing and what an amazing mother you've become." Maria was speechless, her emotions in conflict. She wanted to believe Pedro, she wanted things to go back to the way they were before. But she also knew that they needed more than words to fix her marriage. Maria, I want to help you. I know that I have not been a good companion, that I have been more absent than I should have. And honestly, I am very sorry that you felt that I abandoned you in the process, Pedro said, his voice trembling under the weight of his own words. With Renaissance determination, he proposed a solution. They would find a family counselor and a nanny to help them care for the baby, so Maria could have some time to herself and maybe even return to her career when she was ready. Maria looked at him in disbelief. Was Pedro really willing to do that? She had her doubts, but also a hope resurfacing in her chest. Pedro apologized again, promising to do everything he could to keep his family together. Over time, Peter kept his promises and Mary allowed herself to believe in her marriage again. They learned to communicate better, trust each other, and deal with their problems as a team. Maria was able to take care of herself without feeling like she was neglecting her baby, and her family counseling helped them heal past wounds. Maria realized that her marriage was not a picture of perfection, but they fought together, cared for each other and loved each other. Their beauty lay in their imperfection, in their ability to emerge from difficulties together and stronger. The last night, Pedro returned home early, without a trace of perfume. When he entered, he found a radiant Maria, playing with her son, in a house full of warmth and love. He approached, took the baby in her arms and kissed Maria. In that moment, they both knew that despite the obstacles, they had found their way back to each other. In the end, Maria realized that the struggle, sacrifice, and patience, although hard, had been necessary. She was reminded of the value of family, the importance of self-esteem and the need for communication and trust. And Pedro learned to value and respect Mary's sacrifices, to be a true companion to her, and to not take her love and dedication to her family for granted. Thus concludes their story, with the beautiful and invaluable lesson that life had presented them. If you like these stories, please subscribe and like the video. This will help these stories reach more people.